Welcome to Politics NY with Skye Behind the Curtain, where we speak with our local leaders and elected officials about what is going on in New York City and state politics. And I have the man in charge of New York State finance with us right now, New York State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli. It's a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Skye, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Tom, I want you to just be candid and honest with us about how everything's going and tell us first what's on the top of your mind. And then let's go through your history of how you were the youngest elected official in New York State at the age of 18. So you've really been in the industry really your whole career.
Long time. And I didn't have gray hair then, so that dates me a little bit. But no, I mean, I think, look, overall, so much of what we're going through is still tied to public health and where we're at with the pandemic, right? There's still a lot of concern out there about the Delta variant and having everybody get vaccinated. I'm not a doctor. I don't tell people what to do, but I've been vaccinated and I'm looking forward to getting the booster because, we see how serious it still is if you do get sick with COVID, and obviously still too many people are dying. But that has a big impact on our economy. And our economy, certainly we learned when it was shut down at the start of the pandemic, it had a big impact on government revenues for the city, for the state. Overall, to be brief, and we can go into more detail if you want, I mean, the state, certainly in terms of our budget, is in very strong position today. In fact, our collections are way beyond, billions beyond what we had projected. With our August cash report, as we call it, we were like $5.8 billion ahead of projections. So we have revenue coming in. Why? The economy has been recovering a little more rapidly than first projected. The legislature and the governor did increase certain taxes, so that accounts for it. But the big game changer has been the federal money. The American Rescue Plan has pumped, $12.7 billion to the state, $5.9 billion to New York City, $4.9 billion to localities outside the city, money for hospital schools. That really has been the big game changer. So from a budgetary perspective, we're in better shape. My concern for the city budget, particularly, but also for the state budget, is that money is not going to be there forever, that federal money. So let's make sure we're not making commitments for spending that will continue, beyond the reality of the federal money that's coming in. And the big question for us now is what will happen with the ongoing debates in Washington with the infrastructure, be it the physical infrastructure, social infrastructure. We know that's a deadlocked issue right now, but we'll hope for a positive resolution. So, I mean, my overall takeaway in terms of where we're at, much better than we thought we were going to be, looking back certainly a year ago, let alone just a few months ago, but a lot of caution about where we're headed. And until we really, beat COVID down, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty with where we're at.
Right. Okay. So that's enough on the serious stuff. What's it like working with our new governor and our new lieutenant governor?
Well, these are individuals I know for a number of years. Certainly, I knew Kathy Hochul when I first met her out in her home turf there in Western New York, and Buffalo. I was very, proud to campaign for her when she ran for Congress in a very important race when Medicare was really the big issue back then, and she won. And certainly, I've known her since she's been lieutenant governor. So, as a local official, a member of Congress, and lieutenant governor, we've always had a great relationship, and she certainly changed the tone in state government in a positive way. I think that's good. Brian Benjamin is someone I've gotten to know from his time in the state Senate, and we worked together on a particular issue of making sure our pension fund wasn't invested in private prisons. We had taken some steps in that direction, but Brian, as state senator, pressed and said, there's even some more that you can do. And Brian and Randy Credico and some other advocates got us to a place where we divested all of our holdings in that area. So I've always found Brian to be a person very committed to the issues and causes that he cares about. So I think it's a good team. And look, it's still a challenging time. And, the transition, I think, is working smoothly. But before you know it, as you can appreciate, Skye, we're going to be into the political season. And I think it would be fair to say that there's still a long way to go before the November elections of 2022.
Right.
I know we're not done with 2021 yet, but there's already a lot of discussion and jockeying going on about next year. So we shall see where that goes.
So you know what I'm going to do for the first time this year, Tom? I'm going to go to SOMOS.
Oh, great. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll see you there. If you're there on the front end, I'll see you there. I'm hosting, I believe I'm hosting the welcoming reception
Yeah,
on
you are.
Wednesday. Yes, so you make sure you're there. It's a great gathering of not just political people, but community leaders, and certainly given all the struggles in Puerto Rico, the infusion of visitors and the money that they spend is welcome. And there's some service days set aside to help the people who are struggling there. But it's also going to be a lot of political chatter. So
I
you'll
know,
have the
that's
city
what I heard.
elections finally done. I can guarantee, Skye, that you'll see a lot of discussion about who the next speaker of the New York City Council is going to be. I remember when we went through this 4 years ago, SOMOS was totally preoccupied with people going into corners and, you're buying drinks, buying dinner, and talking about who would be the best candidate. So I think you'll see a lot of discussion about that. But I do also think you'll see discussion about the gubernatorial race and all the statewide offices are up next year, as is Chuck Schumer's Senate seat, let alone the Senate and the Assembly and Congress. And of course, the big question still is going to be what will the lines look like? So besides discussion about issues key to Puerto Rico and to the Hispanic community, the broad Hispanic and Latino community, you'll be there. You'll be getting a lot of political info when you're there. So
Yeah.
you'll enjoy it, and the weather will be nice.
Yeah, I really look forward to it. Now, let's talk about how do we engage more young people in running for office and in voting? Because again, you were elected at 18. In the New York City Council this year, we saw there's a ton of millennials that are on the ballot and who will be elected. And it's really exciting, but we see less of it on Long Island. And I know you're a Long Island boy, just like I'm a Long Island girl. But how do we engage more young people in this narrative?
I mean, it's such an important question, and I wish I had the magic answer to it. When I ran, you mentioned being elected at 18, I ran for the Board of Education in Mineola community where I grew up. And the year I ran, not to date myself, but it was the first year that 18-year-olds could vote. So it was kind of a big deal. We had fought hard. It was tied up with the war in Vietnam and a lot of the social issues, civil rights issues of that time. But young people really pressed to have the voting age lowered from 21 to 18. So, I was active in school affairs, and I was going to college locally to Hofstra. So, and I was still a senior actually when I did this, but I wanted to effectuate some change. When I first decided to run, and didn't necessarily expect to win, but I wanted to just spark debate and discussion. And actually that year, a number of 18-year-olds ran, again, because it was new. I was the only one that actually won in New York State. And I always thought after that you'd see on a regular basis a lot of teenagers or 20-somethings running. You really haven't seen that too much. There was a little bit of it, in the beginning of the Obama presidency, because young people were very engaged in that campaign. And I think you're right. Maybe part of it's related to COVID and young people, really feeling challenged and saying, what kind of future am I going to have if this is the world, that we're entering into? So I do think you've seen more young people stepping up. But I think the first thing we have to demystify the process. You really don't need a lot of money to run for office, especially in New York City. We have the matching funds program. And the reality is the political system is not as closed as sometimes people think that it is. In fact, we've changed a lot of the laws in terms of how to get on a ballot, reducing the number of signatures required and not having so many technical reasons to be thrown off the ballot. As I said, for New York City, a matching funds program, and we're going to have that not next year, but in the near future for the statewide offices and for the state legislature as well, matching funds program. So some of the barriers that have been there that young people, I think, particularly felt are melting away. So I think the challenge back to millennials and our young colleagues is to say, hey, there are opportunities there, and it can be done. Believe me, if I could get elected at age 18, 100 years ago when that was, certainly the young people today where you have the advantage of social media and the way young people connect in ways that we didn't have. I mean, we did it the old-fashioned way, calling people up on the phone or knocking on doors. You have so many other ways that young people effectively communicate, get issues out there. So, my hope is that the pattern that you just mentioned, and it's interesting, not in our backyard, but I was just reading in the paper, this week, Germany just had their big elections. They have the youngest group of members of parliament elected ever. You know, so it's not just a US phenomena that you just mentioned or a New York phenomenon. You're seeing it globally, that young people, some of it's on the climate issue, which I think young people particularly feel motivated on. But I just think the challenge of the times and an uncertainty about an economically secure future, young people are stepping up saying, you know, I want to have some input into what's going on. So yeah, more young people running for city council, for state legislature, for all positions, Congress. I mean, look at the young crop of Congress members that have had such an impact already in Washington. The opportunities are there. That's the great thing about our system.
Yeah, and the more we get into office, then the more empowered the next generation will feel to come out and vote for these people.
Well, I've always said, I felt it when I ran, you know, as a teenager, and I still feel it. The reality is, you know, the young people today have the most at stake with the decisions that are being made, because you all have many more years ahead than behind. And really, that's a lot of what motivated the initial move for the 18-year-old vote. Again, it's history, but it's instructive. The reason so many of us pushed for the 18-year-old vote back then is that the war in Vietnam, which was very unpopular, young men, we had a draft, and it only applied to young men, being sent off to war that people did not want to support and were being killed. You know, I mean, we lost over 50,000 American lives in that war. And we said, you know, and I was a teenager and I was registering for the draft, you know, not thrilled about it, but I said, you know what, I want to have some say in which direction this country is going in if I'm going to be drafted and potentially go off to war. I mean, that's how consequential, you know, the decisions were. But the decisions today are just as consequential and impact on young people. Just the climate issue alone. I mean, you know, if you're going to be around for another 40, 50, 60, 70 years, what's happening to our climate and global warming, I mean, that is key for young people, and especially if you're thinking of raising a family soon. That's enough issue right there to be motivated and to be involved. And Lord knows we need change there, and we're working on it, but we need the energy and the, you know, the push from our youngest citizens to make sure we get it right.
Yeah. So Tom DiNapoli, as our final question, tell us something fun or interesting about yourself that maybe you haven't shared on an interview.
Oh my Lord, I am known as being one of the more boring people out there. And controllers, I always say, you know, controllers are supposed to be a little boring because we're looking at the numbers all the time. What's the most fun thing that I could tell you of late? Well, it's not necessarily fun, but like some other folks in our area, I got hit by the flooding from Hurricane Ida. So what's not fun is that I'm in the process of having to I'm in a first floor apartment in Great Neck, and water came in from everywhere. So we had to rip up all the floors and all the carpets and a lot of the sheetrock. So my little fun fact is I'm in between doing the work, I'm having to pick out samples of flooring and paint because everything's got to be repainted. So my fun fact is that I'm having to focus on domestic issues, which is not really my strength. So that's my you know, my current distraction. And I'm looking forward to, I haven't done it yet, obviously it's just coming out, but I'm really wanting to see the new James Bond movie. So, you know, that's my fun personal thing I hope to do before, you know, before the fall is over.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry about your apartment. You're right. I heard a lot about in the Great Neck area.
Yeah, Great Neck got hit hard. Yeah, not as bad as Queens and parts of Westchester, but where I was, we got hit very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, it was great to spend a little bit of time with you on.
Hope we get to do it again.
Yes, of course. We'd love to do it again. And I will see you at SOMOS too for all that political inside baseball that we look forward to.
If I get any juicy tidbits, I will pass them on to you.
Oh, please. Thank you, Tom. Great to see you.
Thanks. Great to see you. Thanks. We'll see you in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Take care.
Bye.